Muncie, Indiana has been called the most studied city of its size in America. It has long served as a bellwether, a quintessential American small city. The history is important and well documented, but what is it like to move here in the 21st century? Join me, Jonathan Balmer, a new Munsonian, as I interview the people around town who make Muncie truly unique. Welcome to Meeting Muncie. I am here with Mitch Isaacs, the Leadership Academy's Executive Director. Thank you for joining me today, Mitch.
Thank you for visiting.
I'm glad you get to come here in the place where it actually happens, your place of work. And before we discuss exactly what goes on here, I really want to hear a little bit more about how you became a Munsonian.
Oh.
When did you move to Muncie? What did that journey look like? And how did it come to be that you came to make this place home?
So there's a good story there. I'm from one county south. I'm from Wayne County, a little town called Greens Fork, about 45 minutes away. So, of course, I knew Muncie just by proximity. But it was all a part of my college search. I applied to two colleges, Wabash College, Ball State. And Wabash is it's a great school. It's a prestigious school. It's also an all-male school. I was accepted into Wabash, intended to go to Wabash, and then I received my financial aid package, and I received scholarships, but it was still going to cost me more money to go to Wabash than it was here. At the time, I thought I was going to be a high school teacher. So my father said to me, look, your mother and I saved enough money for you to go to college, and we can pay for a state school, but if you want to go to this school, you're going to have to pay the difference. And I said, well, what do? Do I go to the school that is going to cost me extra money and is all men? Or do I go to the school 45 minutes away that won't cost me any money, and there sure are a lot of nice girls on campus? And that's how I became a Ball State Cardinal, and that's how I became a Munsonian.
Have you been here ever since, or did you move away after college for any period of time?
I moved away for 3 years to get a master's degree, and came back with a master's degree and a wife, and have been back ever since. So I was here from 98 to 2002, left to get that master's degree, and came back in 2005.
And before you were at the Leadership Academy, you were at Ball State actually serving there, be employed there before you were here at the Leadership Academy. Is that correct?
That's correct. I spent 10 years in higher education at Ball State. Loved my time at Ball State. I'm a Cardinal through and through. I was a residence hall director for the first 3 of those years, and people may not know this, but there's actually master's level professionals who live in apartments in the residence hall. And when you get 400 college students under one roof, anything that can happen does happen, which is why you need an adult who lives there full time. And so my son, who is now 16, the first place he ever lived was in an apartment in a residence hall. So I did that for 3 years. I ran the campus leadership studies minor and leadership program for another 5 years. And the last 2 years at Ball State, it was my job to find the freshmen who were struggling. And I was basically a college coach and helping those students find their way at Ball State. And so that was my 10-year career at Ball State before I came to Shafer.
That resonates with me a little. Our first home, my wife and I, when we got married, was on campus where we were both doing our master's degree. She was a live-in staff person at the largest freshman women's dorm, and I was the only man who lived in this building of 600 women. Our apartment was just 2 dorm rooms put together. We had our own bathroom, but we shared laundry. Of course, there's always men visiting, and so seeing men around, Collins Hall was its name, was not atypical, except when I went to do laundry, and I asked to have a corner of her bulletin board that introduced her to say, here's my husband, so I could point to it and be like, I just live across the hall.
I belong here.
Yeah, I belong here.
So she was a hall director.
Not a hall director. So
okay.
She had a different sort of position. There were 3 live-in people, and there was a hall director, an associate hall director, and then my wife also served in a supportive role for students, but was not actually the hall director.
Okay.
And that was a really great place to live. We loved living on campus because the environment, there's always something happening. Also, the meal plan was really, really nice.
Yeah.
And something that we enjoyed is we have different diets. So that's one advantage. I think I should pivot a little bit to talk about what you actually do here at Shafer's Leadership Academy. I'll admit, when I was taking requests, I got 2 or 3 emails at the Meeting Muncie email, which, by the way, you can email at meetingmuncie@gmail.com if you have any recommendations for people to interview. But several people mentioned your name and the Shafer Leadership Academy And as someone who's only been in Muncie for a short time, I had never heard of a leadership academy, and it was not immediately clear to me what Shafer's does. So what, not to quote Office Space or something like that, but
Great
what
movie.
would you say that you do here?
Well, Bob, what I would say that I do here, Shafer Leadership Academy, our mission is to provide inclusive leadership development training so that individuals, organizations, and communities reach their full potential. And so what that means is we believe everyone has the capacity to lead. And that's one of my personal articles of faith. And so we like to give individuals an opportunity to learn how to lead more effectively in their workplaces, but just as importantly, more effectively here in the community. So we try to get folks also connected to leadership roles. And then we also provide consulting services, training services. So everything from, a 1-hour keynote. I was just doing a session for Meridian Health Services last week, and I had 130 staff members for 3 hours talking about generational differences, to there are companies and organizations where we are embedded and we are their professional development office or arm, if you will. And so at the end of the day, what it really comes back to is that we believe everybody has that potential to lead. Everybody has that potential to step up and learn how to work more effectively with others and step forward. And so we are here to encourage that and help facilitate that.
One of the things that, as I was trying to familiarize myself with what Shafer Leadership Academy, that came up was some work that you did with Eastern Indiana work on blue-collar worker retention.
Yeah.
Is that being a big issue, especially with the labor market in the way that it is now, where there's a lot of demand for workers. One of the things you said is Shafer Leadership is not unique in offering professional development. We are unique in the way that we provide that training. We're a full-service programming solution with a person-centered approach. We don't talk at people and clients. We talk with them, and we care about developing and supporting people and businesses in Indiana. What did you hear from blue-collar workers, of which there's many in the Muncie area, about what they need to be supported in their work?
So our approach, particularly with that population, it's all about relationships. So oftentimes when you're working, and this is true of any population, I think, but especially blue-collar folks, because oftentimes people in those roles don't have as much formal classroom experience. So they went to high school, probably not college or some college, but most of their learning has occurred in on-the-job training. And so when you want to work with somebody in a more classroom kind of environment, there's often an uncertainty of who's this person, how are they going to help me be better? They don't know what it's like on a factory floor. They don't know what it's like on the front line. And so one of the approaches we take is Tisha Gerhardt, our program director, actually worked in a factory for years until she went back to school as an adult, as a working adult, to get her bachelor's degree. And so she is our best conduit for blue-collar workers, because what she does, anytime we go into a manufacturing space specifically, before we ever start training, Tisha goes onto the factory floor and just talks with people and meets them where they're at and asks about their experience. And then we also do some surveys and some data collection. But I really think what matters most when working with those groups and what we found effective is, since Tisha, it's not academic for Tisha. She knows what it's like to work in that environment. And so she understands. So to go and meet somebody where they're at and talk to them. So the first time they encounter us isn't as some person at the front of a classroom who they may not know, but they've met Tisha, who is just a wonderfully relatable woman. And she spent time asking them about their experience. It starts to build that relationship, because what we do is, in helping people find their potential, is really also helping people see the world and see themselves a little bit differently. That's not an overnight process. And so people have to trust you. And there has to be a relationship to move that forward, and especially with populations like that. So that, I think, is one of the things that make us unique, is the time that we take to build those relationships before we ever even start talking about the ideas.
One of the things that really struck me, and this isn't with Eastern Indiana work specifically, I don't have experience with that, but I was able to go with someone I know to Progress Rail's Family Day and actually tour the facilities, and the body of knowledge required in each section, especially when this person's particular role that is essentially inspecting the work that has been done, was incredible. He's even gone to the United Arab Emirates to look at the work being done on the trains there. And so with a company or a corporation or a business that employs as many people, like I think progress rail is something like 4,000 people. There's so many moving parts that I can just imagine so much slipping through when it comes to knowledge of what a person's work entails and why, what helps them in particular succeed at doing what they do.
Yeah, with the manufacturing environments, where our sweet spot is frontline supervisors. Folks who have not, they've been given the responsibility to lead, but nobody's ever talked to them intentionally on what it means to lead. And so what Tisha does with them in particular is it's like just the quote apparently that I said at some point in time, it is talking with them rather than at them. And so by working with those folks who haven't had that opportunity to really think critically, they've just been asked, hey, you're a good worker, you maybe make a good supervisor. Here, become a supervisor. And then there's now what? And a lot of what people think about leadership and supervision comes from their background and their own personal experiences. So what we try to do with everyone, but particularly with that population through the relationships Tisha builds, is create an environment where they can talk about that. We introduce ideas and concepts, and it's a conversation, it's a discussion, it's an experience. That's how minds are changed, not because someone who, quote unquote, has some credential that you don't have tells you this is how it should be, but through talking and thinking and coming to grips on your own terms with what it might mean to lead a little differently.
Let's shift gears just a little bit. I wanted to ask specifically about some of the things when it comes to Muncie. So I'm going to do a little kind of exercise here. Imagine that you have a friend who somehow, I don't know how, they've never been to Muncie. I know it's hard to believe, but they're visiting and you're their guide for however long that they're visiting. Where are you taking them and what are you doing?
Oh, yeah. Well, let's assume we've got a weekend. Some of that, I always like to ask people what they're interested in. But if I'm just doing a general tour, then we're going to visit all of the spots that people know best. So we're going to go on campus. We're going to go downtown. We're going to visit some of the parks. One place that isn't inside Muncie city limits proper, but is a part of Muncie that folks don't always know about, and I didn't really connect to until a couple of years ago. Prairie Creek Reservoir is one of my favorite spots. Minnetrista is a favorite spot. Downtown's a favorite spot. Oh Yeah Comics is a favorite spot. Elm Street Brewery is a favorite spot. Twin Archer is a favorite spot. There's actually another spot right off of White River Boulevard. It sounds a little strange. It overlooks the river, and just on the other side of the river is the sanitation district's wastewater processing plant. And it seems weird, but I love to get a cup of coffee and sit there because there's some nice seating. You can hang your feet over the concrete near the river, and I found it really peaceful. And so even though there's a sewage plant on the horizon, it's actually a spot I really have come to enjoy. So those are just some of the places I would take someone in Muncie.
You had those just at the top of your mind. I'm very, very impressed.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Oh Yeah Comics.
Uh-huh.
I'm also going to be interviewing Dr. Christina Blanche.
Yeah, Christy's great.
I'm really looking forward to that. I hope people who listen to our show are as well. It's not far from my place of work.
Well, that's great. She's wonderful. You'll have a great conversation.
One of the premises of this show, since you mentioned quite a few unique places, including a place near a sewage plant,
Yeah.
Of all places, who would have thought that I would have had a scenic vista to it? One of the things that this show focuses on is so much of the literature and things around Muncie has been, whether the lens study, before I moved here, I saw so much research. I listened to also Kai Risdall's Marketplace in 2008, had a piece on Muncie, an hour-long exploration of Muncie called Hard Times in Middletown, which used Muncie as a sort of type for the pain of the Great Recession. My question is, given all this research about Muncie, which looks at Muncie through that particular lens of a type, what do you think makes Muncie more than a type? What makes it unique or different from any other place in your eyes?
Well, let me just start by saying how much I love your question and I love your approach. I think it's very insightful to say, okay, here's a place that, at least for the sociologists, is famous as the most average or common place in the United States. But looking and mining for it and discovering and exploring what makes quote-unquote average place special or unique. I just love that that's your take. And so thank you for that. What makes Muncie unique or different? I don't know that my answer is going to be unique, but I do think that it's the people here. It really is. We're such a great blend of people from different backgrounds and different perspectives. And one of the things I really love about where Muncie is right now is I feel like, and this is my language, it's not on a website anywhere, but I feel like there's a pro-Muncie movement happening. People who really do want to see Muncie rethink, reimagine itself. We know what we were the last half of the 20th century, and now we're trying to figure out what we are in the first half of the 21st century. That's something different. And I think that's I visit a lot of other towns and places in my work, and there's great things happening everywhere. But I think Muncie has really owned the fact that we need to reimagine who we are and rediscover our identity. And I think that makes us unique, that we understand that's necessary and that we're doing the work to figure it out.
I like the way that you put that when you're talking about kind of the self-awareness of Muncie. I've talked about that or seen that as well when I was first researching and deciding whether to move here, whether it's the documents put out in previous decades from certain action plans, or downtown and the kind of growing downtown pride from Fire Up Downtown, which is happening again in August, to the First Thursday events that are happening, or to even the way that I see local businesses really bolstering each other on social media, that seems to be real downtown ethos and community. And that's not to say that there's not other great places. Obviously, McGalliard is very bustling, and Ball State is, as you experienced, a great school. But there also seems to be, like, in some of these places that maybe looked very different 40 or 50 years ago, there's now kind of a turn toward what does the future look like. And
yes.
It's kind of exciting to see, and something that I've appreciated seeing as well.
Can I just add real quick?
Yeah.
Because I know there are people who are going to listen to this and say, well, yeah, Mitch, that's great, but there's a lot more work that Muncie needs to do. And I will simply say, a thing can be two things. This can be a community that is still struggling in a lot of ways and still hurting in a lot of ways, and at the same time be a place that recognizes those challenges and is trying to work through and rediscover and reimagine who we can be. So I don't think, because sometimes it feels like in the community conversation you have to pick one of those perspectives. And I don't think you have to. I do think a thing can be two things.
Maybe that leads kind of perfectly to my next question. You partly answered it. You're kind of anticipating a certain interpretation of what we're saying here. What do you think people get wrong about Muncie?
Well, it's funny because I think we eat with our eyes. So if you come into Muncie, and especially if you come in maybe through Hoyt Avenue or a couple of the other corridors, what is going to greet you initially is blight. And you're going to see infrastructure that still needs improved. You're going to see homes that no one's living in, or folks who are living there that are struggling. You're going to see those things, and they're going to make an impression on your eyes, and they should, because they're real, and we need to own that and keep working towards improving that. But if that's all you do is eat with your eyes and not listen with your ears and not get involved with your hands and your feet, then you're going to miss all of the other things that will help your head maybe see it a little differently. And so I think that's what happens is people see just the parts of the community that are struggling and still need help, and miss out on the things that are sometimes less visible and more intangible.
Familiar with Inside the Actors Studio?
Yes, okay. I am.
Well, I like to do a modified version of those questions where I ask, and there's a couple of Muncie-specific questions interspersed in this rapid-fire Inside the Muncie Studio questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Just remind me, because it's been a minute since I watched the show. Do you just want one-word responses, or do you want any explanation?
Let's just do one word, and if something really intrigues me, I'll ask you a follow-up on it.
Sounds good.
I'll ask you to say more. How does that sound?
Deal.
Here's the first question. What is your favorite word?
Reciprocate.
Oh, wow. You were on that. Reciprocate. Okay. What is your least favorite word?
Can't.
What word comes to your mind when you think of Muncie?
Community.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
The opportunity to take a person, place, or thing and help it be better than it was before I encountered it.
Okay, what turns you off?
Bureaucracy.
What excites you about Muncie?
Our commitment to reimagining and rediscovering who we are.
What noise do you love?
The sound of my kids laughing.
That's a good one. Children laughing never gets old.
It doesn't. No.
What sound or noise do you hate?
You know, when you're working with styrofoam, like styrofoam packaging, and
Yes.
the styrofoam like squeaks together, it just makes my skin crawl.
Yeah. I did that today. I got a new monitor for the closet office while I edit this podcast, and it's kind of like the sensation or the idea of eating yarn. It just grates on you. It's not a pleasant one. What profession, other than your own, would you like to attempt?
Professional football color commentator.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I'd love that.
You would like to be even more involved in broadcasting than your local neighborhood podcast.
You know what? I had $1 million idea to start a website where you would actually live broadcast to compete with the professional broadcasters, because everybody complains about the professional broadcasters. I never got off the ground, but I do love talking about football.
Sort of open access color commentary.
I was going to call it honest announcing, and the idea was, because the announcers always, and I get it, but the announcers, they're professional, the language stays professional, and the analysis is usually very specific. My idea is to find a fan of every team. So 32 fans, 32 teams in the NFL. Find a fan who doesn't just know football, but will be honest about what's happening on the field, and be that person who is like watching a game with a friend.
There's an old Key and Peele sketch about President Obama's anger translator. He's president.
Luther, right? Was it
Luther?
Luther?
That he can't say the things that he's actually thinking, but Luther will do it. So you wanted an anger translator for sports fans.
Honest announcing, and I was not going to shy away from a little bit of colorful language,
a little bit of saltiness.
A little bit of saltiness. You don't want it too strong, but enough that it feels like watching a game at a bar or in your living room with a friend.
So, what profession would you not like to do?
Anything that's bureaucratic. I can't deal. I don't appreciate minutia. You need it. Details are important. There are people who are great at it, but just don't make me do anything that's too detail oriented, please.
What do you hope to see in Muncie's future?
I guess I've talked about it a lot. I didn't realize how important it was to me, but I want to see us rediscover our identity, because I think when you know your identity, you find your purpose, and in purpose is passion and joy and spirit. And so I would love for us to rediscover our identity and ultimately our purpose.
The last question for Inside the Muncie Studio is, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Come in. I will be happy if I'm allowed inside. That'll be good enough for me.
That's fair. Well, thank you, Mitch, for joining me today. It's been great to speak with you. Is there anything that you would like to end with, things that people should know about you or Shafer Leadership Academy, ways that they can connect with you online?
ShaferLeadership.com. That's SHAFER leadership.com. So you can visit us there. If you want to attend a program, we provide scholarships. We never let money stand in between somebody who wants to learn how to lead and the opportunity to do so. So visit our website, find a program, reach out to us. If you're not able to pay or your employer doesn't pay, we'll get you in anyway.
Mitch Isaacs is the executive director of Shafer Leadership Academy, and he is one of the many people that you might meet if you decide to meet Muncie.